Good morning, and thank you for participating in today's webinar, Planning Ahead, What's Your Microsoft Dynamics GP Roadmap? A little about Forvis Mazars. Forvis Mazars is an independent member of Forvis Mazars Global, a leading global professional services network. Ranked among the largest public accounting firms in the United States, our 7,000 team members are dedicated to providing an unmatched client experience through the delivery of assurance, tax, and consulting services for clients in all 50 states and internationally through the global network. As part of the firm's consulting services, Business Technology Services provides analysis, design, implementation, upgrade, training, and support services for accounting and ERP systems and sales and marketing CRM systems. Our end-to-end solutions can help clients achieve their digital transformation goals. At a glance, these are the technologies Business Technology Services supports. Today, we're going to be focused on the Dynamics GP ERP system. Our presenters today are Jeremy Atkins-Hill and Ashley Simino. Jeremy is a managing consultant and has deep experience with Microsoft Dynamics GP and Business Central. He has more than 10 years of experience implementing and supporting ERP, manufacturing, and supply chain systems. Prior to joining Forvis Mazars, he worked in manufacturing, retail, restaurant, and distribution industries. Additionally, he is currently attending Kent State University, working towards a master's in accounting. He holds multiple certifications with Microsoft. Ashley is a consultant with extensive experience working with and supporting Microsoft Dynamics GP. She has more than 15 years of experience with the core modules and many third-party ISVs, and also holds multiple Microsoft certifications. In addition to her experience with Dynamics GP, Ashley also works with and supports Business Central. Prior to supporting Microsoft Dynamics GP, she spent several years as the financial controller for a multi-unit restaurant group in the Houston area. Again, thank you for participating in today's webinar. Now I will turn over the presentation to Ashley.
Hello. So today we will define how Microsoft's most recent licensing announcement will impact you. We will also gain insights into the modern and discuss best practices for evaluating your licensing needs. Lastly, we will identify strategies to navigate these transitions seamlessly. Now for our first polling question.
All right, so what brings you to today's webinar? A, you're looking for information about Dynamics GP Lifecycle. B, planning to migrate off Dynamics GP soon. C, exploring options for Dynamics GP upgrades. So, as you take a moment to lock in your response, I do want to call your attention. On Thursday, we have a webinar with Charles Allen, also from the BTS team, and he's going to be diving into Microsoft Fabric, which is kind of like the umbrella now for Power BI and all sorts of cool automation tools from Microsoft. And then also we have related content. So you can download today's presentation. It has lots of great information in the slides that we're going to cover in depth today during today's presentation. And then also there's a great article about the GP licensing announcement. So we kind of cover what this means for clients. And the results are in. So nearly 70% are looking for information about the GP lifecycle. And so with that, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Jeremy and Ashley.
Good morning, everybody. First off, thank you for taking some time out of your day to talk Microsoft with us and specifically how it impacts your GP environment. What we want to start with is just going over the licensing announcement that Microsoft made, and then kind of diving into what does it mean exactly. So Microsoft announced that any new sales of GP perpetual licenses will end on April the 15th, 2025. New customer sales can still purchase subscription licenses though. So maybe a little different than most people understand it. We are still selling GP licenses. If you're an existing customer, this announcement doesn't impact you. If you're existing, this is for new customers only. So really, we're switching from this perpetual model to subscription. And we'll talk about perpetual and subscription licensing today so that you can understand exactly what the differences of those are. For new sales, so focusing purely on the subscription licensing, Microsoft will end sales of GP licenses to new customers completely April the 1st, 2026. Again, if you're an existing customer, you can still make changes both in licensing and modules within the GP environment. And this is purely GP Microsoft related, so not from the ISV community. What happens in the meantime and after those dates? Updates are still going to be provided. So today we get 3 yearly updates. Microsoft has confirmed that they're going to continue to do 3 yearly updates at least through 2028. Those yearly updates are tax, security, hot fixes, and they throw in a few feature functionality changes based on customer votes. And then lastly, support. So the support model is changing to what we're calling the Microsoft, or what Microsoft's calling the Modern Lifecycle Policy, again, at least through 2028. So let's talk about kind of the makeup of that announcement and what some of these terms mean and how it affects you or how it relates to you directly. So breaking down first perpetual and subscription licensing. If you've been with GP for a long time, perpetual licensing is what you should be used to. That's at $3,000 a user. You pay for it up front. You pay yearly maintenance on that. The maintenance amount, somewhere between 17 and 25% are the new rates. And we'll talk about what each of those mean. You can add users at any point. If you reduce users, you don't get a reduction in your bill, so you don't get any credit back on that $3,000. Your maintenance may go down, should go down slightly, just based on that percentage of that $3,000 that you're used to paying. Both subscription and perpetual can be hosted both on-prem and in a hosted environment. Perpetual licenses, concurrent only. So the very traditional model that we're used to, and you own those licenses outright. Whether or not you choose to pay your annual maintenance, you own that license. Subscription model, this is what the industry is really migrating to as a whole, and Microsoft following suit. So any modern ERP does subscription-based licensing. So you pay either monthly or quarterly. With GP, it starts at $70 per month. There is no annual licensing cost, so no annual maintenance. That maintenance is included in that monthly or quarterly cost. The benefit in going to subscription licensing is really just the flexibility to add and remove. So if you're at the $70 per month base cost and you have 5 users today, and tomorrow you drop a license, you go from the 5 at 70 to 4, so from 350 to 280. These are named users though, so not concurrent. So depending on how robust your environment is, will depend on how many users you actually need. So it's not a one-for-one in most circumstances like perpetual. So, and then obviously if you stop paying, that named user loses access to GP. To talk about the maintenance plans, those yearly maintenance plans, we had referenced the 17 to 25%. The 17% is what we call the Business Ready Enhancement Plan, the 19% Business Ready Advantage Plan, and the 25% the Business Ready Advantage Plus Plan. The majority of customers worldwide kind of fall in that middle bucket, that 19%, so the Business Ready Advantage Plan. That's where most people end up. So there's a number of things you get from all of these plans. So the product releases, the service packs, hot fixes, tax updates, those yearly releases, are included regardless of what plan you're in. Customer source access, you get regardless of the plan you're in. If you don't have access to customer source today, or you don't know what that is, reach out to your partner. They can get you hooked up and make sure you can sign in. The Microsoft knowledge base, unlimited online training, transition investment credits. And what those are is if you're going to migrate from GP to another Microsoft ERP solution, that's what transition investment credits are. And then your price list is protected if you're paying maintenance. What that means is as Microsoft licensing increases in cost, because it does, the maintenance that you're paying is based on the cost of the licenses when you purchase them, not based on the cost of the licenses today. If you fail to pay maintenance and then you get back onto maintenance, your protected price list can go away. So kind of the differentiators between these three really boil down to support and the managed forum. So the managed forum is only available with the Advantage and the Advantage Plus plan. 24/7 is really isolated to just the Advantage Plus plan, and then support incidents. It's a 3-hour guaranteed under the Advantage plan and 2 to 8 hours under the Advantage Plus. One thing to note is these support incidents and how quickly somebody responds is purely if you or your partner opens a case with Microsoft. So it has nothing to do with your relationship with your partner directly, or whatever agreement you have in place with your partner. So just to note, again, that's purely with Microsoft. I think this is the next part we want to talk about is the licensing announcement itself, and how does support fall and what direction does support go as we move forward. There's a lot of graphics out there, and if we just take a couple of minutes and we talk about new licensing sales, mainstream support, and then extended support. So depending on what service pack you're on, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, support is still only for a predefined period. So from a new licensing sales standpoint, perpetual licenses, again, go through April the 1st, 2025, subscription through April 1st, 2026 for new customers only. If you're an existing customer and you're on perpetual licensing today, you can stay on perpetual licensing for as long as you would like to. If you're on perpetual licensing today and you want to switch to subscription licensing, you're able to do that as well. Reach out to your partner to start that conversation. It can be a little bit of a taxing move, so it's not something you want to call on Friday and have in place for Monday. So a little bit of work involved there. The traditional support, so if we look back to the major releases, and we really just are tracking from GP 2013 on, those are the only releases still covered by some support model. So 2013 R2, depending on what service pack you're on, extended support goes through April of 2024. I have a wrong date on there. I apologize for that. For 2015, mainstream support ended in 2020, and extended support goes through 2025. If you're on 2013 or 2015, later this morning, we'll talk about kind of what are the next steps there. But for 2016, 2018, mainstream support is done for both, but you are still covered under extended support for at least about a year and a half, 2018, a couple of years. What we're calling Dynamics GP, so not really specifically tied to a model, is kind of that new model of GP. And you can see Microsoft's committed at least through 2028. So mainstream and extended support through at least 2028. So what exactly is the difference between mainstream and extended support? Mainstream support is that traditional model where there were 2 or 3 product releases a year, major releases every couple of years. There was security support update. If you had incident, if you needed Microsoft support on incidents, there was no charge for those. Generally, depending on the support level you have, they could be prepaid or time and material as well. Warranty claims under support went away a couple of years ago, but that was something offered at the time. Extended support is really where we are now. So it follows a very similar model where there's paid incident support and you get security updates at no additional cost. So extended support is where most versions of most products live today. The important part to understand about extended support is that you have to be enrolled in. So getting extended support, if you haven't already paid for that or thought about that, can be problematic. So something you want to think about ahead of time if you're on those older versions of GP and you expect that you think you may need Microsoft's help. So what version are you on? Because this is going to be important to know. One thing to note, something that comes up pretty regular is sometimes people think that the version that they're on is based on when they did their last upgrade, and the two really aren't related naturally. They could be coincidentally. So for the versions themselves, Microsoft has done a couple of flip-flops over the years. So early versions of GP, around the time of the Microsoft acquisition and before, it was very simply, version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 through 10. And then after version 10, Microsoft went to the year naming convention with 2010, and then with the next major release being the R2 release. That continued through 2018. So we had 2018 and 2018 R2. And then Microsoft said, let's confuse everybody a little bit and go from 2018 to version 18. So there is a difference between 2018 and version 18. From 18.0 to the last release we had was 18.6. Microsoft's message is that they're going to stay with this version 18 and just do these dot releases. So 18.7 scheduled to come out here in a couple of weeks in October of 2024. If you're curious about what version you're on, inside of GP, if you go to the help icon and then about Microsoft Dynamics GP, you'll get the pop-up window there for about GP, and you can see there we have in the red box, it'll tell you your version of GP. There's a few other ways to get to it, but if you have a login for GP, this is going to be about as easy as it gets. Sarah, I'll let you take it here for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. So we are on polling question 2, and do the recent Microsoft announcements about Dynamics GP worry you? So, unless you're living and breathing in that admin role, it's not always intuitive if you know exactly which version you're on and when your support or type of support will end. So obviously there is no right or wrong answer on this. We're just trying to gauge how our audience is feeling. So GP has been such a workhorse for so long, and it's a phenomenal tool. So, if this Microsoft announcements are causing a little anxiety, feel free to let us know. And if any of you are planning on attending Summit, Dynamics Community Summit in October in San Antonio this year, look for us at booth 1609. Jeremy will be there. He's presenting. Ashley, are you going as well?
I am. I'm actually presenting with Jeremy.
Oh, nice. Yay. Yeah, perfect.
We're going to do it together. Yeah.
All right. So a third of our audience is feeling a little anxious about it. 40% got this, and 30% are not quite applicable. And there we are.
All right. So as we move on, we're going to talk about the modern lifecycle policy, but we had one question come up based on a few slides ago asking about the managed forum. So I'll just take a couple of minutes and divert and address that. So there's been a bunch of different varieties of forums or methods of communication or blog sites from Microsoft throughout the years. What Microsoft has really gone to is this community.dynamics.com. And inside of there, there's a blog specific to GP. So when we talk about managed forums, it is really that site. And there are a number of Microsoft MVPs and Microsoft employees that post on there regularly. Every week there's updates on there. And in addition to that, they kind of moderate and approve and take down things that are relevant, not relevant, and really try to provide content out there that's useful and beneficial to not just the user base, but us consultants as well. So that Microsoft forum or the blog site, it's under the community.dynamics.com website. And we can probably put a link or get a link out at some point for that as well. So modern lifecycle policy. We talked a little bit before about the fixed lifecycle policy. So that's the older versions of GP. Fixed lifecycle policy really only covered versions prior to Dynamics GP, so version 18. Remember, in version 18, we start referring it just as Dynamics GP. With that fixed lifecycle policy, every version of GP when it came out had established support dates and product end of life. Under the modern lifecycle policy, there really is no end of life. So Microsoft will offer continuous support and servicing, really around bug fixes and payroll tax updates. So this goes from version 18.0 and newer. The caveat here with modern lifecycle policy, because there is still dates where support ends. So the stance from Microsoft is that all of these versions are covered. So any of those service packs are covered for 24 months from their release date. So, and we have a slide that kind of breaks down those newer versions of Dynamics GP and what those end of dates look like. We'll go over that in a couple of slides. But really, to stay current, obviously paying yearly maintenance is important, but then also installing at least one of the 3 yearly planned Dynamics GP releases. That's not a Forbes Mazars stance, that's direct from Microsoft. So Microsoft is saying, if you're going to stay current, you need to do that one of the 3 yearly planned GP releases. The one you do really is just dependent on your business. So if you're doing payroll, you obviously want to do the latest and greatest because that'll have all the payroll tax updates. If you're doing 1099s, there's a release specific for that. So differences between the fixed and modern lifecycle policies. Fixed is really, it's a finite support system, very concrete start and end dates, where the modern is being billed as an infinite support. And then, of course, with the fixed, there was the traditional upgrades. And if you guys have been through those, and I'm sure a number of you have, extremely labor intensive, tedious, difficult to do. Once you're on to a newer version of GP, so 18.0 and newer, it's really just updates. So much, much simpler. For people that have dexterity customizations, we're seeing that being a whole lot easier once we get to the updates. Again, each year, if you just earmark, 1 year, once a year to apply that update, typically can be done either overnight or over a weekend. If you have a test environment, we typically do it there and then roll it to production. So fairly simple. For long-term Dynamics GP maintenance, a few things that are important to keep in mind is staying current. One, so that if we do have to go to Microsoft, we're not forced into doing some service pack or something before Microsoft will help us. If you're not upgraded to a current version, thinking about that, making year-end updates a part of your long-term plan, and potentially even talking about or thinking about migrations. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on this morning as well. So as I promised, the duration, the 24-month duration of the service packs, 18.0 came out in 2019, and they supported it through 2021. So here's a breakdown. I'm not going to read through each of these for you. The only caveat was 18.1. It was a COVID year, so we really skipped that one. So for 18.2 or newer, so you can see from the dates there, it is now September of 2024. So if you're not on version 18.5 or 18.6, you're already out of support with Microsoft. So again, much less labor intensive, much easier to do, a whole lot less time involved, not just from a application standpoint, but also from a testing and adoption, acceptance testing. So service packs, much easier now as opposed to upgrades before. So long-term Dynamics maintenance, GP maintenance, I want to take a few minutes and just talk about what are some of those long-term options specific to GP if you're going to stay on GP. Those year-end updates. So there's typically 3 a year, June, October, and December, not within the same calendar year. So it's a little bit flipped. So the first release will come out in October, then we usually get a December release, and then the final release in June. So probably think of it from that standpoint. So we're real close to that initial release. October release, generally bug fixes, feature functionality, sometimes some tax stuff, early tax stuff if the states have reported that if you're on payroll. The December release, it would be your 1099 stuff and additional tax updates. And then June would be any additional bug fixes and the final release of tax updates. That's how it's been traditionally. So I think the important part too is Microsoft had made the announcement about no new feature functionality, and that's really big module stuff. So as a GP customer, you can still request feature functionality changes to help your business within existing modules. So Microsoft does take a look at those and includes a handful of those every year. I don't want to give a number, but generally like in that 5 to 10 range, depending on how complex those are. Upgrades. Traditional upgrades are still recommended if you're multiple service packs behind or you're on a version prior to 18.0. So if you're on 18.0 and we want to go to 18.7, we would still treat it a little bit like a traditional upgrade. And that's how you should think about it, because there's a couple of service pack hops we got to do there. As far as a timing thing, again, it can be a few hours to a full weekend. It's really just dependent on how many companies you have, how big those databases are, your hardware configuration. I think we're hard pressed to do it in less than 2 hours. So an hour and a half to 2 hours is about the absolute minimum. And for large environments, I've seen them run, like 2 full days. So they can still be time intensive if you have a lot of companies, a lot of data that has to go through that. And then migrating to a new environment. So in addition to the software, if your hardware is older, you're going to have a decision to make. What do you do on the hardware side? Do we take the servers and replace them with new on-prem servers? Or are we looking at Azure and moving to the cloud? Or are we looking at a hosting partner who's going to take care of all that for you? So when we think about doing an upgrade, we also want to think about what do we do with the physical hardware at that point. Is it less risky if we combine that upgrade and that migration into one project as opposed to 2 separate things? So something to think about. If you guys are in the mindset of doing a migration, please reach out to your partner and see what options that are out there for you. At Forvis Mazars, we do hosting. So if you don't have a plan for a migration and you need a new environment, please reach out to anybody here at Forvis Mazars and we can get you information about our hosting options. So the next few slides are going to look pretty similar because we're really going to review here in quick detail year-end updates, upgrades, and then migrations. And I wanted to just take a few minutes and give you kind of a high level about why I should do it and what happens during that process, or what should happen during the process. So starting with the year-end updates or those service packs. So why should you do the service pack? Obviously, if you're doing 1099s, you want to get those updates. If you want those bug fixes that Microsoft's releasing, to include new and modified reports. So there's been a few new reports come out in the last couple of years. If you're thinking long-term, so making a move to a potential modern ERP a little bit easier, being current in GP makes that transition a little bit easier, or can make it a little bit easier. The new feature functionality, payroll tax, we already talked about those. Security updates is a huge thing today. The security world, or the IT security in general, cybersecurity is becoming more complicated as we move. So Microsoft is addressing that through security updates as a part of those year-end service packs. And then obviously staying compliant with Microsoft. So in the event we need Microsoft's help, or you need Microsoft's help, staying compliant will be important. What happens during a traditional, so what does that project look like? And this can be done by your partner, or it can be done in-house with the guidance of a partner. It's really up to you what works best and how your internal team feels about applying these updates. So we recommend doing database backups before you start the process as well as after. So you have that point in time if you need to roll back, or you want to evaluate the data before you started and after it was done for potential data corruption, of which in the last few years we've had zero instances of, or we've seen zero instances of data corruption here at Fortis Mazars. So something that's gotten better over time. Early days of GP, that was a huge issue. We're not quite seeing it anymore. So documentation update. This is a great time to go through any documentation you have related to your current environment. So installation files, configuration files, passwords, stored hopefully in a secure location. So take the opportunity to update your documentation during this time. There's going to be a little bit of downtime while processes run. That's a great time to get that done. Reporting. So baseline and post update. This really follows that traditional upgrade model. So running those baseline reports, whether it be out of SmartList or Management Report or whatever financial reporting package you're using, Solver, running those reports for a comparison both before and after, really just giving your finance team that warm fuzzy that everything was successful. Backing up your forms and reports dictionaries. This one is probably the most critically skipped step in anything, and it's something you should be doing on a regular basis, regardless of any of this year-end maintenance. Corrupt forms and reports dictionaries are a common thing, and if you don't have a backup, you're really putting yourself into a bad situation on how do you recover from that. So having backups of your forms and reports dictionaries, extremely important if you ever need to rebuild those. Backing up your application directory, and then lastly, applying the service pack and the update. So again, it's just like any other service pack. You execute that service pack and then run Dynamics utilities to upgrade the databases like we're used to in a traditional upgrade. Once the service pack is finished, there's really a data validation that whoever's doing the upgrade should do, just making sure that you can get in and see that the data is there still, that we're not getting error messages that we weren't getting before, things like that. Wrap it up with upgrading your ISVs and any customizations. A large part of the ISV updates really revolve around Microsoft technology changes, less with GP, but more when we're talking about operating system, Office 365, things like that. So as they make changes to those products, that usually cues the ISV to make those changes as well, and not to take away from the ISVs that are doing regular product updates to their solutions as well. So, and then lastly, updating your terminal servers and workstations to make sure everybody's on the same service pack. And then at that point, we would turn it back over to the end users. So a pretty traditional year-end service pack update. Again, a couple of hours through, a couple of days at most. The upgrade. So you'll notice right away, the why is exactly the same. there really is no difference in why we should be doing these things, but what happens during is just a little bit different. And the difference really is just in the time and the steps. So what we've outlined here is the same as what was outlined in the service pack update. The difference is with an upgrade, you have to go through these steps multiple times. So the database backups could happen 3, 4, 5 times, depending on how many hops and how many upgrade steps we have to do. So that's the real big difference between the upgrade is just we go through these processes multiple times. The time to do an upgrade can be significantly larger as well. So sometimes what we end up doing is if we're going from a very old to a very new is potentially so there's less impact on the business is doing an incremental one weekend and then doing the final the next weekend or the next month or something like that. So upgrades just more intense. And then migrations. With migrations, it's essentially the same thing as doing an upgrade. We'll talk about the steps in a minute, but just so we understand the options for a migration, the migration doesn't necessarily have to be one thing. You can have an on-premise migration where you have old servers and hardware, be that they may be physical or virtual, and then you're just going to move from one set of hardware to the next. So typical environments, it's SQL servers, terminal servers, user workstations. That's pretty common with the on-prem stuff. Why would we do an on-premise migration? We control the cost. We're familiar with that environment, and we have full control over it. That's why most people like on-premise. What are the disadvantages to that on-premise deployment? One, it's how we've always done it. So if we get into this mindset of how we've always done it, it can limit us and newer technology, advancements in the solution, new feature functionality. So if we're always focused on how we've always done stuff, we lose out on a lot of that other stuff, which really is going to come back to bite you when you decide to make that jump to modern ERP, because it's going to be a huge drastic change. Instead of taking those kind of one little bite at a time, it's a big chunk all at once. Another disadvantage to the on-prem is you really have to have this in-house skill set, whether it be from a managed services provider or you're physically hiring people to manage that environment. And then obviously the IT infrastructure. So servers are one thing, but now we're talking additional networking equipment and firewall and security stuff. Like just there's many, many layers to that IT infrastructure when we're on-prem. If you are on-prem and you're struggling with that in-house skill set, again, this is something that we offer here at Forvis Mazars. Please reach out to somebody. We'd be happy to have that conversation with you and see how we can make that process easier for you. It's something we do every day. It's something we're very comfortable with. So just even if it's just to listen and reassure you that what you're doing is the right thing, we're happy to do that. Cloud options. I think the thing that really we want to be upfront about here is there's no true cloud offering like modern ERP has. So our cloud deployment of GP really involves just hosting your data in a hosted environment somewhere. And that could be in Azure, that's very commonly used, but it can also be with a managed services arrangement in coordination with like an Azure environment or something like that. The advantages to this, control and security. Those organizations and Microsoft as a whole have really invested into making that access as secure as possible. I think it's pretty safe to say more secure than most organizations can do in-house. Preparation for modern ERP. If we get users used to the idea that they have to go somewhere to work, it kind of alleviates that just clicking on an icon on your desktop down the road. And then scalability. When you're in Azure, you're in the cloud, you really have an endless amount of scalability you can do. If your organization acquires another company and you quadruple in size overnight, it's really pretty simplistic to spin up a few terminal servers and have everybody working easily the next day. Disadvantages, adoption has to be number one. So it's that how we've always done it mindset, right? So we're not used to logging into a terminal server. We're not used to having somebody control us. We're not used to multi-factor, those sorts of things. So the adoption of those changes is typically a roadblock here and something a lot of people struggle with. Cost is the other disadvantage. So with on-premise, with on-prem deployment, that cost, you know what it is year over year over year over year. When you're going to the cloud and you're paying somebody to help manage that for you, their costs are going to go up just like any other costs in the world today. So although not significant, that cost is less predictable. And then the one we most often deal with is fear of data loss. This was something that early on as organizations went to the cloud, and this idea was rampant. If I put my data in the cloud, anybody and everybody's going to have access and can steal it. And that's couldn't be farther from the truth. So if fear of data loss is something that you guys are still battling with and hearing and struggling with and something you believe, please reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation, myself or anybody at Forvis Mazars, and talk through how do we protect that data and how is your data secure today. So why do we do a Dynamics GP migration? Really, we've talked a lot so far about keeping our software up to date, but keeping your hardware up to date is equally as important. So hardware costs today significantly less than what they've been in the past for like hardware configurations, but the cost of the hardware is just a small factor, right? So it's about speed and performance and improving your end user experience as well. So one reason why we recommend considering a migration. And then obviously keeping current. We know what Microsoft's expectation is of us to stay current, but should it stop there? Or do we want to keep current across the board? And then what happens during a migration? So there's quite a few more steps here, but it really is very similar for a large portion of this to the upgrade and year-end updates as well. Kind of the difference is when you're going to do a migration, we would provision those servers, whether they're on-prem or they're in the cloud. We would get those servers ready, or your partner would get those servers ready for you. Once the servers are ready to go, then we create that test environment. So we wanted to mimic your production environment, and the reality is this test environment is going to be your production environment when we make the production cutover. So we create that environment, we install GP, your current version, and then we go through that upgrade process. So we move databases, we move users, SQL users, everything that you would need, we go ahead and get it moved over. Once we go through the upgrade process, that same process we talked about a few slides ago, then we select a select group of users, and that can be as big or small as you want it to be. And what we ask them to do is get in there and really beat up that system. Test it, try to break it. Things that they're used to doing daily, weekly, monthly, we want to stay on track with those, making sure we can do all of those things that we're used to doing. Is it necessary to try to close a year and do some of that stuff that happens kind of infrequently? Not necessarily. If we can close 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 months, we know that we expect that year-end closing will be seamless as well. So once users have gone through their acceptance testing is really getting their sign-off. So having them verify to us that they've done that. Then we go into a planning session to talk about live migration. What does that mean? What are the steps? What dates work? What dates don't? What roadblocks are we going to have? And then we start into that migration. So we kind of restrict access to the production environment. We do your upgrade in this new environment, we do data validation, and then we turn it back over. The caveat here is once you go live in that new production environment, don't get rid of that old production environment until you've done at least 1 month end close. We want to make sure that we get through and everything is successful. And then once we do that, then you can depreciate your old environments, and then we would go through a project completion review. So I'll turn it back over to Sarah for this next question. If you have any questions about migration, upgrades, year-end updates, please reach out.
Yes, please. So the contact information is on the slides for Jeremy and Ashley. Also, an easy email for us is bts@us.forestmazars.com. And our third polling question is up, and it is reasons to upgrade include automatic updates, access to new features, gain the latest security threat protection, D, all of the above. So just for my personal knowledge, we have some questions coming in. Ashley's taking those, so we really, really appreciate all that engagement. I have a question for you, Jeremy and Ashley. Have you ever done a version 13 to up to 18? Like,
yeah, we've done a couple of those in the last couple of years, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are fun and exciting.
I bet.
And mostly fun and exciting because there's so much new feature functionality and the system is so much more stable and responsive and faster. So just getting those calls, a month after about how much better it is, the anxiety is always high going into those. And then once we get through that anxiety, just to hear the stories back from the end users about how much better their environment is and how much better their workday is a tremendous call to get.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's also fun to see it's also fun to see the users see the new features, and they're like, "Why haven't we done this sooner?" Yeah, it's fun.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah. So just to get my marketing brain working, I was like, okay, so in 2013, the latest iPhone model was the iPhone 5. So I'm just trying to think about doing what I do on my phone today on that operating system, that hardware. And it makes me hurt just thinking about it.
Android users can do GP on their phone through a remote desktop terminal. Not recommended, by the way. But they can if somebody out there has the drive to try it out.
That's fun. Oh, we have a very brilliant audience with us today. 83% D, all of the above.
All right, let's talk. We're almost to the end here. There's a few more slides. So I want to talk about evaluating your licensing needs. So what type of user licenses are out there? So there's 3 types of licenses: the full, the limited, and the self-serve. The limited and self-serve, it's really a gray line there on what those licenses can do. Full users are very obvious. They can have full read and write access to the entire system. How do we control that? Through user security, GP user security. If we have users all set to power user, they can do anything and everything. The GAP stance on that, it shouldn't be that way and things like that. So just keep that in mind. Limited licenses. So they have full read access to the entire system, but write access is really limited to payroll and project. And then self-serve is the user. So user self-service, payroll, and project entry. So significantly less access in that self-serve license. How do you know how many registered users you have? There's really a couple of different ways to do it. We talked earlier about customer source, and we have a kind of a sister site, I'd like to call it, called Partner Source. You can pull up your account or your partner can pull up your account in Partner Source and tell you exactly what you're licensed for. What most people don't realize is you actually have that control yourself, and you can see it inside of GP. So again, we went to About Dynamics GP before to see what version we're on. We're going to go right back there now to see our users. So when you go into the About Dynamics GP window, there's this box with users, and it really tells you how many are logged in and how many are registered. But as you know, those blue fields with the underline are click-through fields. So if we click on that user's link, it'll actually bring us to our license. So it will tell you your site. It'll tell you what model you're under. So if you're concurrent or your subscription, it will have your site ID. I blanked out some data here to not expose some information, but it'll tell you how many full users, limited, and self-service users you have. That allowed column is what you're licensed for. And then down below, it'll actually tell you, it gives you a full list. I put myself in there just so you could see how it looks, but it tells you every user that's set up in GP, whether they're active or inactive. And then it also tells you what type of license they're on, whether that's a full, a limit, or a self-service. So most people don't realize that you have that power kind of at your hands already. So we talked a lot about, for existing customers, that because you're existing, there is no end date for when you can add and remove users. So what if you want to add users? It's pretty simple. You just reach out to your Microsoft partner and tell them you want to add users. There's potentially some paperwork or a quote process or something depending on the requirements from your partner, but it's really just that simple. You're just ordering licenses. Microsoft has this deactivation request form. I've taken a few screenshots of it, but it's a one-page Word document that Microsoft has us send in if you want to deactivate. The first section is just your company information. So what product are you using? What's your account number? What's your company information? If you don't know that information, your partner can fill that out for you. And then there's a section for your partner information. So again, this is your partner account information that will have to be filled out by your partner. Then the last section or two sections depends on whether you're removing users or you're removing modules. So if there's modules that you're paying for that you're not using anymore, we can get rid of those. But you can also reduce the count on user licenses as well. So if you have 40 users and your business model's changed and now there's really only 5, you could go from 40 to 5 and you could cut 35 of those user licenses. It's going to reduce your yearly maintenance. Again, you don't get any rebate back on that initial purchase price, but your yearly maintenance will go down. Then lastly, and this is pretty important to know, is then we have to have sign off from the client. So who's the contact, what's their title, the date, and the signature. The reason that this is so important is this information needs to be signed off on by somebody who's registered with Microsoft. So inside your customer source, or your partner can do it inside a partner source, we need to be able to call out that individual person. If they're not on there, we can add them. What about ISV licenses? These can be licensed a bunch of different ways. So just like GP concurrent named users, some ISVs have full solution access. So if you reduce your GP, it's not going to affect your ISV. A lot of ISVs do tiered licensing based on the number of GP users you have. So just as you reduce your user licenses on GP, discuss with your partner about your ISV solutions as well, so they can let you know about any licensing changes there. So transition strategies. So now that we've talked about all this, if you're going to make a change, what things are important for you to keep in mind to make these switches successful? One, try to stay out of that "it's how we've always done it" mindset. Take advantage of the advancements in technology and the tools that are out there for you. Really lean on your partner, because they're the ones that are going to help you guide you through these changes and help you plan long term. And long term is the next thing, right? Don't think about this fiscal year or next fiscal year. Really get in that 5 to 10 year mindset, because that's really what you got to be thinking about now. Microsoft's only committed through at least 2028. So that's quickly approaching. So start thinking long term. Embrace GP for what it is. It's a great solution. It's a fully vested solution. It is what it is, and there's not going to be any more big things. So what you have today is probably about what you have. Lastly, is take ownership of your system. Don't let somebody dictate to you what you need to do and when you need to do it. Really take the time and plan out what's important to your business and your organization, and make those plans around your business. And then think outside of the box. Modern ERP and advances in technology can make us super uncomfortable, and that's okay. Start to think outside the box and how can we improve efficiency and things like that. So one quick success story, if you do licensing reviews, there are substantial savings there. We did a project last year. We cut 85% yearly cost in maintenance by doing a huge reduction in users. This client was also spending over $100,000 a year in hosting fees. We moved them to a different hosting partner, got them under $20,000. Time savings due to upgraded functionality. They were on an old version of GP. By getting them to new, they could take advantage of things like workflow and stuff like that. And then as they think about modern ERP, we estimate about 30% of that migration from GP to Business Central. We can save about 30% of the time because they're on a modern version of GP, and we can use some of those migration tools. And then conclusion, Ashley.
All right, so in conclusion, be sure to get some time scheduled with your partner to go through and evaluate your GP licensing needs and requirements. Also, don't forget to schedule your year-end updates or an upgrade if needed. You'll want to make sure you are current with Microsoft to be eligible for their support. If you have software that is out of date or close to it, definitely consider updating your environment or even moving to the cloud if that makes sense for your organization. And lastly, have a plan for your long-term ERP needs, whether that is getting or keeping GP up to date or making a move to a modern cloud ERP. Have a plan. And that brings us to our last polling question.
All right, you guys are awesome. So much information in this less than 1 hour. So on this note, would you like to connect with the Forbes Mazars Business Technology Services professional to discuss your Dynamics GP roadmap? So we'll give you a minute to lock that in. Just a reminder, please check out the related content. I'm going to scroll ahead to this. So feel free to screenshot or take down their email addresses. So if you have specific questions, we are happy to help answer those. And our generic one is bts@us.forbesmazars.com. So we greatly appreciate all your time today. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Jeremy. And I think that wraps us up.